Approval of a resolution establishing Mason County Citizen Advisory Committee, Budget Committee, establish bylaws for this committee, and issue a news release soliciting citizens to apply to serve on this committee. Is there a staff member who can give a brief explanation?
Commissioners, Frank Pinter. In an effort to improve the financial stability of Mason County, the commissioners have agreed to create a Citizens Committee, Advisory Committee to evaluate the Mason County budget and provide recommendations to the commission in regards to a few specific areas. Recommendations on budget priorities based on mandates, recommend how to close the funding gap between expenditures and revenues, examine and evaluate new revenue sources, new revenue options, and provide recommendations on which to pursue, define and recommend alternative budgeting methods such as zero-based budgeting, line item authority, biennial budgets, define opportunities to better manage expenditures and revenue growth, and then how to establish recommendations for a countywide sustainable budget.
Any questions for staff? Yes.
Frank, speaking to the structure of this committee, I understand that we're still going to assign, or a commissioner is going to assign themselves, or there'll be a vote, and that will be assigned to the chair position with a vote in case of a tie. If that's still the case, what's the rationale behind that?
That is still the case. The committee is to be formed with 2 citizens from each of the districts, commissioner districts, with a 6th member being a commissioner who would then be there to vote in case of a tie.
7th member.
I'm sorry, a 7th member to vote in case of a tie.
Okay. It's a little unusual.
Well, testimony can be saved for another point of question. Any further questions? All right, thank you very much, Frank.
Sure.
With that being said, since there's no further questions, now is a good time for testimony.
Thank you.
Would you like, please?
Thank you, Commissioners. Tom Davis. This is the first time in this whole process the public has been able to speak. It's I think, kind of a shame that we should get this far along in the process where we're going yay or nay before asking for input on a citizens committee. I also think it's a little bit unusual. I would almost, I would like to see the issue tabled and for you to open it up to public discussion under item 10. But if that's not going to happen, then I have a couple of comments to make. Normally speaking, I find it unusual that the 3 commissioners will designate one of the commissioners to sit as the chair position, which is usually voted by the Citizens Committee. This is a Citizens Committee. And then that person will also have the opportunity to break a tie, much like the Senate, in case of a tie, and a tie could be 2-2, it could be 3-3. And it also, I'd assume the tie would extend to motions during the process, not just the recommendations that are going to be forwarded to the commissioners. So what you have is a sitting commissioner who is instrumental in the construction of this whole Citizens Committee process and in the structure, and then you have that same commissioner instrumental in picking the candidates or the members of that sitting Citizens Committee, and then you have that same commissioner guiding the process, and then you have that same commissioner sitting as the chair, the same commissioner sitting with a vote, which could break the tie, and the same commissioner going back to this position to vote on whether or not the recommendations will be accepted. That's an awful lot of authority delegated to one particular person, and I'd like to suggest that you amend these bylaws and find a little bit better way, and the better way would be to have the Citizens Committee pick their own chair. If that's not going to happen, and I'm not going to get an opportunity to speak again, obviously, if that's not going to happen, then I would suggest that Commissioner Schutte be that person. And the reason that I would suggest that is because he's the newest commissioner on the board, because I believe he has the best relationship with the heads of the other departments and with the sheriff's department, which actually is somewhere in the neighborhood of 40% of the budget, and that issue is going to be a major issue. And if you come to the table with past history, which is not desirable, then you're probably not going to move that far down the line. So my suggestion is that if you're going to do it this way, then at least have someone with the least history in the past negotiations over these 6 years, which has failed to balance the revenues with expenditures, and now pretends to do the same thing with the Citizens Committee. And I don't think it can be done, quite frankly. Thank you.
Okay, is there anybody further who would like to testify at this time? Hearing none. Commissioners?
Okay, so, Mr. Chair, obviously very supportive of moving forward with this process. Something that I had advocated for last year as part of our budget deliberations, and I'm happy to see through a deliberative process we're able to put together a committee. We could, I imagine we could probably postpone this and continue the discussions around how it's established and who sits on it, and we could probably do that into perpetuity, but I'm anxious to get the work started, and I think ultimately we will, I think, have a fair and open process that people are able to participate in. I'm confident of that, and so I look forward to supporting this process as it gets underway.
The design of which I agree that we could go on forever on it, and the timeliness of of hoping to have some recommendations coming forward prior to adopting a 2019 budget necessitates a well-run group of people, the power of which one chair in this particular situation is to making sure that the work gets done in a timely manner. It's very, having observed and sat on advisory committees myself, I've seen things go off track, and it's very hard to bring it on back. And you do need somebody who has at least that desire to get the work done in a timely fashion to make sure it stays on track. And so I approve of the design at this point, and there's nothing to say that there couldn't be some changes later if it doesn't turn out to be as effective as we hope to design it to be.
Mr. Chair, if I can
Yes,
for a second.
please.
Just a quick question for staff. So the way that the bylaws are constructed, if at the convening meeting they wanted to change the bylaws, is there a mechanism for bylaw review?
By a majority of the vote of the committee.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay. So now, with that, I want to add, I think you're mistaken if you think that this is the first time that the public has had an opportunity to discuss this with us. I have had much discussion with many of the public. The fact that you and I had not had a communication does not mean that the public has not been involved and had, plenty of input. I would assume that the other commissioners had done the same. As for a commissioner being selected, I want to point out that two of the commissioners are the ones that appointed Commissioner Drexler to serve on it. And with that being said, although it seems like a heavy load the way you explain it, I want to point out that Commissioner is not only very successful in what she's done in all these years, as are we all, but we are the elected representative of the people. Not the appointed, the elected representatives of the people. And by electing us to these positions, many, other than just 1 or 2 or 10, have made the decision that the decisions should be made through this group. So appointing this person, a chair, for this committee as an actual elected representative of the people seems like a wise thing to do, rather than a select few that we may choose on our own on the side. And I want to point out that your comment about the budget, again, that's incorrect as well. We had a lack of revenue that came in, and we adjusted the budget accordingly. There's a big difference between the way it was expressed. And with that being said, I'm going to be in support of this the way it's set up. as there was a lot of work that went into it, but it's the idea of if we don't do it now, when will we do it? And if we wait for another month before we get it all ironed out, will we get the advice back that we need or the recommendations in time? Please.
Sorry, one thing you had said, Mr. Chair, kind of triggered another thought for me. Other counties have gone through similar processes with having citizen budget sustainability committees, and when I was as we were working through this process, I had conversations with commissioners in other counties about what they had done, and Lewis County had just recently gone through it, and they had a 3-person panel who basically co-wrote the budget with the commission. Kitsap County has a standing committee that includes a commissioner as well as members of the public and even some, I believe, labor side representation. So I don't believe it's all that uncommon to have a commissioner, and I say that with all due respect. I appreciate your concerns, but in conversations that I've had with other counties who have gone through similar processes, the commission, by virtue of our role as budget writers for the county, I don't believe there are many counties that completely outsource that work without wanting to have any kind of involvement in the process. Thanks.
I will entertain a motion. Oh, we're past that. I'm sorry. We're into commission deliberation.
I just want to say.
Conley, please, we're into commission deliberation now. I apologize. Commissioner?
Mr. Chair, I move for the approval of the resolution establishing a Mason County Citizen Advisory Budget Committee, establish bylaws for this committee, and issue a news release soliciting citizens to apply to serve on this committee.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded for the approval of the resolution establishing the Mason County Citizen Advisory Budget Committee, establishing bylaws for this committee, and issue a news release soliciting citizens to apply to serve on this committee. With that being said, is there any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.